Hello and welcome to my 4-part series entitled Caregiver Support. Each week in October 2021, I will be sharing my personal point of view as a caregiver. I will discuss sensitive topics such as cancer, death, mental illness, and other subject matters relating but not limited to caregiving. Please keep in mind that I am not a medical professional. This entry is solely to share my personal experience in hopes of helping someone else who may be facing similar life situations and are looking for relatable content. This is not to be used as a professional or medical guide. For those of you who are brand new to my podcast and YouTube channel or did not know, my mom passed away from metastatic breast cancer on June 6 of 2014. Since then, I've been doing my best to share her story, intertwined with my own, in hopes of helping others who are facing similar life scenarios. I appreciate you taking the time to listen and to learn more about what an amazing person my mom was and how she continues to live on through others. Anything that has to do with my mom's final months, week, days, hours, minutes still leaves me with times of disbelief. I want to believe that this is just a horrible dream and that when I wake up, she'll be here with me and helping to guide me along. Instead, I have her legacy to carry on for her behalf. As I mentioned in a previous episode, my mom's cancer came back after she was in partial remission, meaning that the cancer was dormant. Over a year later, the cancer had metastasized and spread. She was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. My family and I truly thought that she beat cancer, just like my mom's mom, who's my grandma, and that I affectionately call Ma, and my great-grandmother. But unfortunately, my mom would not be as lucky. Now, I don't remember the specifics leading up to the official visit at the oncologist's office, where I would hear the devastating news. I do remember that they asked my mom to wait in a separate room and had me meet with the head of oncology at the cancer center. As gently as the doctors and his associate could, they informed me that my mom would die of cancer. The tumors had spread like wildfire through her body. They could continue chemotherapy and radiation for as long as my mom wanted to, but this would be her demise. It would just prolong the inevitable. The doctor told me that my mom was unable to tell me of the official report. My mom and I had promised that we would tell each other everything, but she could not bear to tell me this. And I was unable to process what they were saying, and I had to ask them to explain it to me again and again. And I just remember crying a lot. I knew that this was all true, but had been in denial. They informed me that the next step to take was to prepare for the end. I needed to get ready for end-of-life preparations and to ensure that my mom had her affairs in order. Upon leaving the office, I could tell my mom had cried. It was a silent walk to her car. Inside of the vehicle, we sat for a few moments and didn't speak. Then my mom turned to me and asked me what they said about her in the doctor's office. I gave her a brief synopsis of what they said because I couldn't bear to see the words, "You're going to die of cancer." Realistically, she knew. However, she became angry because of what the doctor and nurse said to me. For the entire ride home from the center, she was in denial, and I was at a loss for words. I needed her. I needed her help. But she put up a wall that I had never experienced from her before. And that's when it really hit me that our roles were going to be reversing. I would do whatever I could to protect and provide for my mom. I've never experienced this before, I should say, and I relied a lot on the doctors, staff, family members, and friends to help guide me through this. My mom was extremely organized, which I was able to use to my advantage to ensure that things were properly in order. Checklists and gathering additional information helped to provide additional clarity. And when my mom wanted to open up about what she wanted, ultimately, then I was able to take notes and I ensured her that I would make whatever she wanted happen. She always did her best for me, and it was my turn to do my best for her. So for you, caregiver, here are some stepping stones that helped me along the way. One of them was planning. When it comes to arranging final affairs for your loved ones, you need to make sure that you have the following 3 through an attorney. Now, every state's different, so I'm talking on behalf of the state of Florida and back in 2012 when we went ahead and started getting everything going. One of them was the will. the other one is power of attorney, and the other one is healthcare directives. Now, of course, the will and trusts allow a person to decide who gets what from their estate and finances. A power of attorney, or POA, names a person who will make decisions for them in the event that they are no longer capable of doing such. Healthcare directives state things such as a living will and how a person wants to have their final moments. For more information, I included the link to the National Institute on Aging within my blog, and also just make sure to continue to speak with the appointment medical team as well. So whoever is appointed to your loved one's care, just make sure to constantly stay in contact with them, ask for some help, and look for attorneys that can help you with it too. Now, after that diagnosis, my mom refused to do any of this because she insisted that a piece of paper that she wrote on from years ago would be sufficient enough. So then she decided to turn the tables on Dexter and I, saying that since we didn't have these in order for ourselves, then she didn't need to have it done. So my husband and I, we made appointments for ourselves with an attorney and put our final wishes onto official documents. And then within a month, my mom had her appointment scheduled. When it comes to hospice, and the oncologist informed me that my mom could no longer benefit from chemotherapy or radiation, then my mom made the decision to stop going to all of her doctor appointments. So around this time, I had to contact hospice. Again, medical professionals will be able to help guide you through this as well, so don't be afraid to ask questions. And I spoke to my mom about having a hospice nurse come by and visit and check up on her. And she again refused because she felt that if she allowed them to come by, then she was letting cancer win, which was not the case. Thankfully, I met with hospice prior to my mom's visit, and one of the nurses sat down with me and discussed what hospice does, because I always had that misunderstanding too, that it's just end-of-life care and that's all that they do, but they don't. They do a whole lot more. So the nurse went over what typically happens towards the end and how to best prepare myself and the rest of the family when we met one-on-one. And then for the very first appointment, my mom acted like she was okay with having them there. And after having her vitals checked and the follow-up appointment was scheduled, then my mom was actually happy to have met them. And after they left, she no longer felt bothered by having them come by and felt more comfortable because she could see that it was more of an at-home appointment. Now, at this time, my mom was living with my ma and my uncle, which is her brother. And I kind of feel that they were uneasy about having hospice come in because it was somebody who was invading their living space. But thankfully, hospice was able to take all of that into consideration and did a phenomenal job of including my ma and uncle throughout this transition. For funeral arrangements, after my mom met with her attorney to put her affairs in order, we went out for what would be our final dinner out at the Cheesecake Factory. I still remember the booth and how my mom picked at her food, and my heart just broke for her. And finally, my mom looked up, put her fork down, and began to talk openly. She told me she wanted to be cremated. She explained that she didn't want to be buried with her tumors. And in her own way, this made her feel like she would survive cancer. I agreed and asked where she wanted her ashes to be spread. Jokingly, she said around the shopping center where we were, so she could shop and smell the food from different restaurants. This is one of the many things that I miss about my mom, and the way that she would lightheartedly joke through uneasy conversations to lighten the mood. Now, for personal memories and difficulties, I miss so much about my mom, but there is a lot about this specific time frame that I do not miss. Obviously, this is not easy for anyone, and it's difficult for the person entering the end of life, and it's heartbreaking on those around them too. For me, my mom had been fading since November 4th of 2012. Cancer took a hold of my mom's light, love, and humor. She was not consistently the same person she once was, once the tumors took a hold of her brain. Like I've said before, my mom and I would confide in each other about anything and everything. We were all we had for so many years. We were the only ones who understood each other to the base of our souls. And one of the hardest parts was watching my mom lash out at everyone. She would take bits and pieces of words that she heard and twist them around, ultimately hurting those around her. It was extremely difficult when she made accusations against me, Dexter, and those closest to her and around us. As one of the hospice nurses explained it to me, it was like my mom was stuck inside of a dark room. All of her deep down fears and things that she was afraid of were coming to the surface. These would twist and turn just to be released in a fury rage. Some people, it never happens. But since my mom was one not to get upset at anyone else, she always kept things to herself. She always wanted to make sure that everyone else was happy and everyone else was okay. And she would always put aside her own feelings. And after my mom was done talking, whenever she would have one of these moments, then she would become upset and she would just become silent and then she would cry. Now, thankfully, this was a quick phase, but one that created enough drifts that are still being prepared to this day. And since my mom was living with my mom and uncle, medical equipment would be brought in to their house to help provide additional comfort and safety for my mom. Hospice visits increased, as did medications and equipment. As my mom's primary caregiver, a lockbox was provided to keep medications out of anyone else's possession. I lived about 20 minutes away and was on call for when my mom needed medication. Now, one thing that gave my mom her motivation to keep her going were her students at Clay High School. She would give them her all of her time, her energy, her love. She adored her students. Even with 20 plus tumors on her brain, let alone the countless others plaguing her body, it didn't stop her until a couple of months before her passing. In late March of 2014, my mom no longer had it in her to go in and teach. I knew then the end was near. She always wanted to teach. She went back to college at age 39 to obtain her bachelor's, all the while being left as a single mom and struggling to make ends meet. But she did it though. And after a few days of her calling in, I had to go in and retire my mom from the job that she loved the most. Every single person working at CHS was amazingly supportive. Some of the faculty came to visit my mom and presented her with a plaque and thanked her for all she did. And this meant so much to her, as did the many students who came by her bedside just to hang out and watch movies with her. They chatted privately and my mom felt loved. I always knew that my mom was amazing, but just to see this firsthand from others, even to this day, still means more than words can say. So with all the good stuff, sorry, with all the good stuff, unfortunately, there is some not so nice people out there. So you have to protect yourself, your loved one, and those around you. Hence the reason why I felt the need to include this portion as a side note that I have entitled The Vultures. So anytime money is involved, you will suddenly hear from people who you lost contact with years ago. You hear about it plenty of times with people who win lottery and things like that. Or else all of a sudden there's family that you never knew existed. These are the vultures. These are the people I'm talking about who fly around waiting to pick you apart at your weakest. And the best way they know how to get to you or your loved one is by acting as if they truly care for your loved one that is passing away. It's horrible to even have to think about it, especially at this time. But you are at your lowest point, about to lose one of the most important people in your lives, then you have to deal with these jackals. So please confide in the attorney that your loved one appointed, and an attorney that you can trust. If it's not the same person, feel free, you can have your own attorney. Stay focused on the care and treatment of your loved one, but be aware of who you are letting in or back into your lives. Some vultures can be point blank obvious. So for example, days after my mom died, Dexter and I received a knock on our door. And it was from someone who knew my mom and said their car was dying and that they knew that my mom would have wanted them to have a brand new car. Seriously. Other vultures may have hurt you in the past, but will work years back into your life and that of your loved one, even gaining back the trust of other friends and family. After death, they will slowly rip you apart when you are emotionally drained, claiming that all they did for you, your loved one, the other ones, must be paid back to them because of all they gave up. Watch for the red flags because you will be weak at this moment. To share with you, My mom had $0 to collect on her estate. She had a term life policy for her insurance, but it expired 6 days before my mom passed. In all honesty, I can honestly say full-heartedly that I am so glad to have had those additional 6 days with my mom, because that is worth more than any amount of money in this whole world. I got 6 extra days with my mom, and I'm so thankful for that. And ironically, at this point, that's when a vulture decided not to show up. And that was such a red flag. Because I cannot stress this enough, I wish I would have soaked in more of my mom's look. You know, like the look that you get when you know that something's up. And she gave this to me when I informed her that an individual was no longer going to be in our lives at that moment. And I just took it as they were busy. And instead they were planning and preparing for other things that were not good. And I wish that I would have soaked in more of my mom's look. Because this was like the bright red flag that was waving, and I just ignored it. Because I was losing my mom, and I was willing to disbelieve the reality that was taking place. I was afraid of losing anyone else. So please, if you haven't picked up enough with this, be aware of the vultures. If you're strong enough, shoo them away from your lives now. If you're not strong enough to do such, talk to a therapist and be sure an attorney is aware of what is taking place. You may not think it's any big deal, but I'm telling you, these vultures, they are there to swoop in when you least expect it. So please remember, during this time, self-care is extremely important for you and those around your loved ones. You've got to take care of yourself. Continue to see your doctor for regular checkups and speak up with how you are feeling and what you are experiencing. Be open and be honest. Ask them for help when you need it. And if you need just additional help around the house, or if you have other people to care for, things too, don't be afraid to ask for help. Because soon you won't have all of that support around you. And I'm going to go in more of that for the final part of the series. And I will continue to talk more about my mom's legacy, her final week, her final words, and I will discuss life moving forward without my mom. And as always, I appreciate you and your time. Thank you so much.